My name's Jim Brownlee. I'm past governor of the Apprentice Boys here in Londonderry. I'm a native of the city, uh, born a few decades ago. Grew up through the Troubles, experienced some Troubles-related incidents, and in my tenure as governor of the Apprentice Boys, was responsible as a leader for bringing about negotiations or involvement in negotiations about parading in the city.
The Good Friday or Belfast Agreement marked a turning point in Ireland's history. In your view, what has been the most profound impact of the agreement on society?
Well, first of all, can I point out the Apprentice Boys Association is not a political organisation, but we are, of course, everybody's subject to political machinations, whether it be from Belfast Agreement or local government or indeed national government. I didn't vote for the Belfast Agreement because I felt that there were a number of issues within it that were in some ways not conducive to normal democratic process. They seem to be rewarding people for acts of violence which would be counter-democratic in my view, and therefore it wasn't a fulsome agreement, and certainly wasn't a fulsome agreement when we look at the fact that there are now convicted terrorists in government in a democratic society. And I think you'd be pushed to look at any country in the world that would allow that, let alone tolerate it. I feel that it certainly hasn't played out the way a lot of people who voted for it hoped that it would. And in many ways, that is a justification for my reluctance to support it in the first place.
Do you think it has to create any changes in society in Ireland?
Well, it's brought about relative peace, but it hasn't, in my opinion, brought about the fruits of the labour of peacemakers, because in many ways it's an easy title to play out as politicians are now politicians, whereas prior to that, themselves or their comrades, as they like to call it, were fairly anti-democratic in their actions.
You talked a little bit about relative peace and peacemaking process. What do you consider as the biggest challenges or resistance to peace-building process in Ireland right now?
Well, I think the Belfast Agreement was an agreement signed by both Unionists and Republicans. But from the Republican side, the agreement promised the constitutional position of Northern Ireland would remain so, as long as the majority of people here wanted it to be so. But from the Republican side, a lot of them can't even say the words Northern Ireland, and they don't accept the current constitutional position as being the norm or being acceptable, albeit that they've signed up to this agreement that defines in law that it is the constitutional position as stands at the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Would you say that we have overcome any challenges regarding peace building process?
Having grown up through the Troubles and witnessed what I've witnessed, there are a lot of gaps which are not being filled as a consequence of the Belfast Agreement. For example, the legacy legislation that is the Conservative government had put in place, whereby there would not be any more investigations into the murders of loved ones, where families were left stranded and without a voice and no corridor to bring about justice in their lives for the murder of their loved ones. Albeit that the new Labour government has said that they will repeal that law. Now, that, from a personal point of view, I agree with them. I can understand their feelings. The difficulty I have with it is that the Belfast Agreement said that anybody who was convicted subsequently of terrorist acts would only serve 2 years in prison. In other words, terrorist acts that were carried out prior to the signing of the agreement. So therefore, they would only serve 2 years in prison. And that was justice. So I don't agree with that.
And to you, what do you think is the most important element to peace building process in Ireland?
you referred to Ireland. Irish Republicans look upon the term Ireland as being one country, but in reality, it's two. It is factually two different countries, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland as it stands. Yes, there has been peace brought about. The difficulty with this peace that we have is that people who did not experience any of the troubles are now just living this particular moment of history, i.e. post-Belfast Agreement. Now, that to me is somewhat dangerous because the opinions being expressed are based purely on their own personal lives, and they're not reflecting the reasons why the Belfast Agreement came about, and indeed the reasons for opposing such machinations within the Belfast Agreements because of what happened prior to the signing of it. That seems to have gone. They're now, we've moved on, sort of thing. A lot of people can't move on because their loved ones have been murdered.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you would think that the agreement was more like a mitigation or more like a compromise than a solution.
Yeah, it was a compromise. There's no doubt about that. I'm not feeling very strongly about it because I'm just observing and noting that people feel let down, particularly in the unionist side. And as regards the negotiation of the Belfast Agreement, it was agreed that there would be a border poll if it was felt by the Secretary of State, that is the Westminster Secretary of State, felt that there was a possibility of a United Ireland coming about as a result of a border poll. But there was no counter legislation to suggest that if the border poll was held and that was the situation and it became a United Ireland, then that was it. That was the end of it. There was no counter argument to say, well, if we have another border poll, can we go back if the first one doesn't work in the eyes of many? And we're talking about basic economics here, how people live their lives. We all want a comfortable lifestyle, and economics, the economy has got a lot to do with it. And there are suggestions that a United Ireland would put a strain on individuals' economic ability to live the lives that they're leading at present in an acceptable way. It's not as if to say that if you had a United Ireland, everybody would feel a lot better and everybody would be a lot richer financially and more comfortable. That's never been proved, and it's never even been discussed. And obviously, unionists, by the very nature of the term unionist, don't necessarily want to discuss it anyway, because that's not what they're about.
And if you were to pinpoint one specific problem or challenge that is, as you said, impeding having sustainable peace rather than relative peace, what would you say?
Well, you still have dissident Republican groups who disavow or indeed disown the supposed principles of the Belfast Agreement, and they refer to an unfinished revolution. Irish politics has been littered with rebellions for centuries, but from the point of view of Northern Ireland, from the establishment of the state in 1921, a good example would be the activities of the IRA in particular, in whatever form it takes, because in 1922, following the formation of the Irish Free State, the Boyne obelisk, which is an obelisk which was erected at the Boyne site just outside Drogheda, commemorating the victory of William at the Battle of the Boyne, was blown up by pro-treaty IRA forces, pro-treaty being the ones who signed the Treaty of Partition, but it was blown up. The IRA, to mark their 50th anniversary of the Eastern Rising, following a border campaign from 1956 to 62, which failed basically, and there were a number of IRA incursions from the inception of Northern Ireland in 1921, but in 1966 it was the 50th anniversary of the Easter Rising, so they blew up Nelson's Pillar in Dublin on the 8th of March, 1966, and that was marking a continuation of trouble. So there's always been a non-acceptance of Northern Ireland And that feeds into the Belfast Agreement in my eyes. The fact that they can't say the words Northern Ireland, the terminology is not used. It's it's off the page as far as they're concerned. They refer to the north of Ireland as if to say Ireland is all one at present, but politically it's not.
I think you talked a little bit about community organizations like the Citizen Republicans. What role do you think these organizations, no matter from the Republican side or from the other side, what role do you think they currently play in society?
Unless you're a member of the organization in question, it's hard to describe what the motivations are. But there's a lot of doublespeak. I can only speak on behalf of the organization that I am a member of, as Apprentice Boys. The Apprentice Boys Association believes in civil and religious liberty for all, and that in many ways manifests itself in how the constitutional monarchy of what became the United Kingdom has played out from the late 17th century right up to the present day, whereby the people have the power, as opposed to prior to the Williamite Wars in Ireland, prior to the Siege of Londonderry being the pivotal point of that. It was a case of the divine right of kings, the power of the monarch. We'll refer to yesterday, which is now July, where the state opening of Parliament, and the whole thing's played out whereby Black Rod is shut out of the House of Commons by the elected representatives. That goes back to Charles I, who made his way into the House of Commons, the House of the Common People, and he was not a common person. He was the monarch, but he demanded. He was looking for money for wars, basically, but he demanded that his voice be heard. But he was never elected. There's a lot of that goes. A lot of people don't understand the nature of the organisations that are referred to. What I will say is that people call themselves Republicans, but in many ways, a lot of their activities are actually religiously sectarian. And in particular, I referred to the Boyne Obelisk. I referred to the blowing up of the Nelson's Pillar in Dublin. Once they do something once, and they get a supposed, from their point of view, reward in doing that, they'll repeat it. Republicans do that, and they did it here in the Troubles, and they blew up a pillar which was topped by a statue of Governor Walker. Governor Walker was the joint governor during the Siege of Londonderry. He later went with William to the Boyne. He was killed at the Boyne, but they blew it up in 1973. Why did they blow it up? Because they had blown up the obelisk. They had blown up the Nelson's Pillar. Here we have it again. It's a copycat thing from the Republican movement's point of view. Never talked about, but certainly noted.
And from the Apprentice Boys organization point of view, what would be the approach or agenda to peace building in Ireland?
Well, the Apprentice Boys offer no threat to anyone. They don't come along as yes, they're a Protestant organization. They're a loyalist organization. They're a loyal order. But the principles of the Apprentice Boys are very much based on the status quo of the rule of law and a democratic society. So they don't offer a threat in that respect that you would say, well, we don't really want democracy here. Let's vote democracy out. Ironically, that's the situation you'd be getting into. Apprentice Boys Association, they're not a political organisation. I pointed that out. They're a historical Christian commemorative organisation commemorating the events, in particular of the Siege of Londonderry of 1689, marking a pivotal point in the Williamite Wars in Ireland, where King James II, who believed in the divine right of kings, he believed he was anointed by God to rule the people, having been deposed from his throne, or indeed he abdicated in the end, but he wanted, with the purpose of coming back to retake his throne, needed to do it by a circuitous route. That's why he came to Ireland, where he would have had support from Jacobites being supporters of James, and also then moving to Scotland, and then moving south to England to retake his throne. And if you like, reintroduce the divine right of kings as he saw it. But the blockage came here in Londonderry. So from the Apprentice Boys' point of view, although we're not political, we believe in the institutions of democracy, and every position within the Apprentice Boys, every officer's position is the person is there by a democratic vote within the organisation, and they're re-elected every year. That's throughout the whole organisation, whether it's the governing body of the association, which is known as the General Committee, or each club, each parent club. The parent clubs are based here in Londonderry, or the branch clubs scattered throughout Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Scotland, England, Canada, and as far away as Australia. Everybody has to be elected before they can serve as an officer. So I think that's the strength of the organisation, because once you're elected, if you do something wrong, you'll soon find that you're not elected the following year. I'm not saying that happens, but the structure's there to allow it to happen.
What do you think is the impact of the organisation on a community?
I think there's a lot of misinterpretations from the Catholic or indeed Republican side of the of society that Irish Republicans, and I'm talking about the IRA here, in general, they looked upon the loyal orders as being a strength within the unionist community because it brings people together, and it's very much representative of a strength, and it's a strength that they want to oppose. So therefore, they oppose parades. Now, again, it's a copycat thing. They've opposed parades in the past, and to a certain degree have been facilitated by compromise, by weak governments, by favourable politicians from their point of view, which to me is not democratic.